The church pews were still filled with stunned guests, their whispers slicing through the heavy silence like razors. Emily stood alone at the altar, the ivory lace of her gown clinging to her body like a second skin she no longer wanted to wear. Her bouquet trembled in her hands, not from nerves, but from the raw humiliation of being told in front of everyone she loved that she wasn't enough to be someone's wife. Daniel had walked out with a single sentence, cruel and final. "I can't marry someone who can't give me a family." No warning, no chance to explain. Just the echo of his footsteps leaving the chapel and the faint gasp of her mother behind her. Later, back in the bridal suite, Emily stared at her reflection, barely recognizing the woman in the mirror. Mascara ran down her cheeks like ink bleeding through paper. The veil felt suffocating. All she could think about was the sterile doctor's office months earlier, the word infertile hanging in the air like a death sentence. She had hoped love would transcend biology. She was wrong. But what Emily didn't know, what no one in that room could possibly foresee, was that her story wasn't ending in that chapel. In fact, her real journey hadn't even begun. The morning had started like a dream. Sunlight filtered gently through gauzy curtains, casting a golden glow across Emily's bridal suite. Her best friends buzzed around her, adjusting her veil, fluffing her dress, dabbing tears of joy. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe in the fairy tale, the one where love conquered everything, even biology. She'd told Daniel about her infertility 6 months earlier. They were lying on the couch, her head in his lap, the TV murmuring in the background. His response had been soft, but firm. "It doesn't matter. We'll find our own way." She believed him. She had to. But as she stood in that church, watching, Daniel's face morphed from nervous to cold. A pit opened in her stomach. He took a step back when the officiant asked the question. Then another. And then he spoke words that shattered the world she'd built around him. "I'm sorry. I can't do this. I want children. Real ones." Gasps echoed. Her father stood. Her bridesmaids froze mid-tear. Emily couldn't move. It felt like every organ in her body had clenched. She couldn't even cry. Her breath caught in her throat like it was a shame to leave. The guests started whispering. Her Aunt Rose reached for her. But Emily stepped away, clutching the flowers like they might hold her together. She walked back down the aisle alone. The same path she'd dreamed of walking with someone beside her. Outside, the sky had turned cloudy. It was supposed to rain later. Someone had joked it was good luck, but Emily knew better. Some storms don't wash things clean. They just strip everything bare. She didn't go to the reception. She asked her maid of honor to cancel everything. Leftovers would be donated. The DJ was paid. The cake would never be cut. That night, she slept on the couch in her wedding dress, refusing to unzip it. It was the only thing that made the day feel real. Everything else, the betrayal, the silence, the echo of the word infertile like a curse, felt like a cruel hallucination. But just as she drifted into an exhausted, dreamless sleep, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel. "I hope someday you find what you're looking for. I just know I need something more." Emily deleted it without reading it twice. And somewhere deep inside her, something started to shift, not healing, not yet, but the slow, stubborn birth of anger. As she turned off her phone and stared at the ceiling, a thought crept in, uninvited. What if he was right? What if this is all I'll ever be? But in the quiet, a second voice whispered back. Or what if he just never saw who you really are? The front door clicked open with a mechanical beep, and Emily stepped inside the apartment that had been meant for two. She had painted the walls a soft sage green just 3 weeks ago. Daniel said it felt peaceful, like a place where a family could grow. Now the color mocked her, soothing and sterile all at once. She slipped off her shoes and dropped her keys into the ceramic bowl they'd bought together at the craft fair last fall. His keys were still there. She stared at them for a moment, then left them untouched. The silence in the room was deafening, interrupted only by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the muffled city noise outside the window. In the bedroom, the closet was still half full, his shirts still on hangers, his cologne, the cedar, one she loved, sat on the dresser like it was waiting to be used again. Emily ran her fingers over a flannel shirt, then pulled it out and held it to her face. It smelled like him, like morning coffee and fall and promises never kept. She sank to the edge of the bed and let the gown pool around her feet. Her hands trembled as she reached behind her back to undo the zipper. The fabric whispered as it slipped off her shoulders, as if mourning its own fate. She folded it gently, almost reverently, and placed it on the chair by the window. In the bathroom, she wiped off the last of her makeup with shaking hands. The woman in the mirror looked older than she remembered. Not old in years, old in spirit. Her eyes, once bright with quiet determination, now seemed distant, hollowed. She opened the medicine cabinet and pulled out the prenatal vitamins she had started taking on instinct months ago, even though she knew they wouldn't help. She stared at the bottle, then dropped it into the trash. It landed with a dull thud that sounded too final. That night she cooked for one. The lasagna she had prepped days before, intended for a candlelit dinner with her new husband, now sat heavy in the fridge like a cruel joke. She took a slice, reheated it, and ate it standing by the sink, not tasting a thing. When she finally crawled into bed, his side untouched, pillows still fluffed. She didn't cry. She didn't have tears left, but her hand instinctively drifted to her belly, flat and quiet, and stayed there. And for the first time, she whispered aloud into the dark, "What if there's no one else after this?" The room didn't answer, but something in her gut, that same stubborn place where hope once lived, curled into a tighter knot. Emily returned to work 3 days later. She told herself staying busy would help, that diving into emails and spreadsheets would dull the sting. But as she stepped into the office lobby, she felt the weight of invisible eyes, cautious glances, pity-filled smiles, whispered half-sentences. That trailed off when she walked by. Her desk was exactly as she left it, a framed photo of her and Daniel at a pumpkin patch, still smiling like nothing could ever break them. She turned it face down without hesitation. Karen from HR was the first to speak. "We're so sorry, Emily. If you need more time..." "I'm fine," Emily interrupted too quickly. Her voice sounded brittle, like glass under strain. But she wasn't fine. Every hallway felt narrower, every meeting room colder. The silence wasn't comforting anymore. It was accusatory, loud in its restraint. No one asked what happened, but everyone knew, or thought they did. That Friday, someone left a small card on her desk. No name, just a message. "Everything happens for a reason." She stared at it for a long time before slipping it into the shredder. Some things had no reason. Some pain just existed. At home, the wedding gifts continued to arrive. Blenders, embroidered towels, monogrammed glasses with initials that no longer belonged to anyone. She opened them methodically, one by one, and dropped each into a cardboard box she labeled "Return or Burn." When she finally talked to her mother, it was a strained phone call. Her mom offered the kind of comfort that felt like advice wrapped in shame. "Maybe next time, don't tell them everything so early. Men get scared." Emily didn't reply. She just stared out the window, watching the neighbor's dog run in circles, chasing its own tail. At night, she Googled stories about other women who couldn't have children. Some had adopted, some used surrogates, some simply moved on. But the ones that stuck with her were the women who spoke honestly, the ones who admitted to feeling defective, erased, othered. Emily didn't feel defective exactly. She felt invisible. As if her worth had quietly exited the room the moment Daniel walked away from that altar. And yet beneath all of it, the judgment, the silence, the boxed-up gifts and shredded cards, she felt something else. A strange, stubborn flicker. Not quite anger, not quite hope. Just the faint pulse of a question. What now? It was one of those evenings where the cold settled deep into the bones. Early March in upstate New York, where even the street lamps seemed to flicker a little slower. Emily had stayed late at the office, partly for the quiet, mostly to avoid going home. The apartment still smelled like him. She took the long route back, walking past the library and the park where they used to bring coffee on Sunday mornings. Her hands were buried deep in her coat pockets, head down, when a rustling near the bus stop made her pause. 2 kids, a boy and a girl, sat huddled behind the bench, barely visible in the dim light. The girl looked around 7, thin as a twig in a too big hoodie. The boy was older, maybe 10 or 11, holding her like a shield. They both froze when they noticed her. Emily hesitated, instinct battling caution. But the girl's face, pale, frightened, framed by unbrushed curls, reminded her of a picture she'd once drawn as a child, of a scared bunny hiding under a tree. "Hey," Emily said softly, crouching down a few feet away. "It's freezing. Are you okay?" The boy didn't answer. He just narrowed his eyes and pulled the girl closer. "We're fine," he finally said. "Go away." Emily didn't. Instead, she took off her scarf and slowly held it out toward the girl. "You look cold." The girl peeked at her brother, then at Emily, then took the scarf in both hands and wrapped it around her neck like a ritual. Emily glanced up the street. No adults, no bags, no sign they were waiting for someone. "Do you live nearby?" Another silence. The boy finally replied, "Used to." It was enough. Emily didn't ask more. Instead, she offered something simple. "I have leftover soup and heat, if you want." The boy looked torn, the kind of caution that only comes from being burned too many times, too young. But the girl's stomach growled, and she whispered, "Can we go, Alex? Just for tonight?" He nodded, barely. They walked back in silence. Emily unlocked her door, let them in, and watched as they hovered just inside the threshold, unsure whether to trust the warmth. That night, she heated chicken noodle soup, gave them clean towels, and found 2 extra blankets. They didn't say much, but when she passed the room later, the girl was asleep on the couch, curled against her brother, scarf still around her neck like a promise. Emily stood in the hallway, heart beating fast. Not with fear, but something else. Something she hadn't felt in months, a flicker of purpose. The sun rose reluctantly the next morning, casting a soft glow through the living room window. Emily stood in the kitchen, pouring cereal into 3 bowls, 1 for her and 2 for the unexpected guests still sleeping on the couch. She wasn't sure if they'd stay for breakfast. She wasn't sure of anything, really. The boy, Alex, woke first. He sat up slowly, eyes scanning the room with the precision of someone used. To new places turning dangerous, the little girl followed, yawning with a tiny squeak and rubbing her eyes like a kitten. "I made breakfast," Emily offered gently. "Hope you like Honey Nut Cheerios." The girl grinned. "That's the best one." Alex sat at the table reluctantly, his shoulders still tight. He didn't touch his spoon right away. Emily noticed his eyes drifting toward the door, calculating. "My name's Emily," she said, pouring milk into their bowls. "What about you 2? "Alex," he said cautiously. "And she's Kaylee." Kaylee flashed a shy smile and reached for her spoon like she'd been starving for more than just food. Emily didn't ask where their parents were. Not yet. Instead, she kept the conversation light. Favorite colors, school subjects, whether they liked dogs. She learned that Kaylee loved anything purple and that Alex didn't trust people who talked too much. After breakfast, she offered them clean clothes, old sweatpants and a hoodie from her donation bin. Kaylee beamed. Alex hesitated, but eventually took them. It was around 10 a.m. when reality caught up. "You should probably call someone," Alex said, eyes fixed on his cereal bowl. "Like, someone in charge." Emily paused. "Is that what you want?" Kaylee looked up at her brother, wide-eyed. "No, I like it here." Alex swallowed hard, jaw clenched. "We can't stay here." "Why not?" Emily asked. "Because no one lets us stay anywhere. Not for long." She didn't know what to say to that. The quiet in the room grew heavy. She suddenly wished she had something better to offer than cereal and hand-me-downs. Something permanent. That afternoon, she drove them to child services. The woman behind the desk didn't flinch when she saw them. Like kids showing up this way was just another Wednesday. Emily filled out a report, gave her number, and left with a lump in her throat. She didn't expect to see them again. But that night, just as she was settling onto the couch with a blanket and a dull ache in her chest, her phone rang. It was the caseworker. They ran. Again. And the girl keeps asking for you. Emily sat up straight, her heart thudding. "Can you come in?" The fluorescent lights in the child welfare office buzzed like bees trapped in jars. Emily sat in a cracked plastic chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Across from her, a woman named Dana, the social worker assigned to Alex and Kaylee, flipped through a manila folder thick with reports, court documents, and names. Of temporary guardians who hadn't lasted long. "They've been placed 5 times in 8 months, Dana said, not looking up. "Alex doesn't talk much to adults. Kaylee clings to him like he's the last stable thing on earth." Emily nodded slowly. "I can see why." A few minutes later, they brought the kids in. Kaylee rushed to Emily without hesitation, throwing her arms around her waist. Alex lingered behind, arms crossed, staring like he was bracing for disappointment. "You came," he said. "More accusation than gratitude." "Of course I did," she answered. Dana cleared her throat. "They need somewhere tonight. Possibly longer. We can arrange a temporary placement, but we'll need to do a home check and I want them with me," Emily said quickly. Dana blinked. "You're not on the approved caregiver list. Are you a relative?" "No," Emily admitted. "I'm just someone who cares." The room went quiet. Later that evening, Emily sat through the first of what would be many interviews. She answered questions about her income, her health, her living situation. When Dana gently asked why she wanted to do this, Emily hesitated. "I was supposed to be a mother by now," she said. "That didn't happen. But I still have space in my home, in my heart. I think they know that." The silence that followed was heavy but not unfriendly. By the end of the day, she left with a signed temporary custody agreement. Just enough paperwork to make their arrangement legal, at least for a while. That night, back at the apartment, Kaylee ran straight to the couch and asked if she could wear the purple hoodie again. Alex hovered in the kitchen, unsure whether to unpack the small plastic bag that held all his belongings. "You can leave your stuff in the closet," Emily said. "You've got your own shelf." Alex didn't move. Then quietly, almost inaudibly, he asked, "How long are we staying?" Emily paused. "As long as you want." For the first time since they met, Alex looked directly at her, and his eyes, always so guarded, flickered with something fragile. Not trust. Not yet. But the first tiny crack in the wall. The paperwork piled up faster than Emily could process it. Background checks, home inspections, fingerprints, references, parenting classes, court dates, a psychological evaluation. She hadn't realized that opening her door to 2 children would also mean opening her life to a system that questioned every inch of it. The first hearing was brief but bruising. Emily sat on one side of the courtroom while a state-appointed attorney listed the reasons she was not an ideal candidate for guardianship: no spouse, no parenting experience. And though it wasn't said outright, the subtext lingered. In the room, she was infertile, as if that biological fact rendered her emotionally incomplete. She left the courthouse with tight shoulders and clenched fists. On the ride home, She played Kaylee's favorite song, an old Fleetwood Mac track she danced to in socks every morning. It calmed them both. Later, while Kaylee napped and Alex read quietly on the balcony, Emily sank into the couch and reread the case notes. Abuse in one home, neglect in another. One foster parent had returned them after 2 weeks, saying Kaylee cried too much and Alex didn't know his place. Emily felt something rise in her, not just protectiveness, but fury. Who had ever made space for these kids to be more than symptoms of someone else's failure? The next morning, she called her lawyer, a neighbor's cousin who took on the case pro bono. "We're going for full guardianship," she said. "I don't care how long it takes." What followed was a storm of appointments and testimonials. Emily's best friend wrote a letter about her integrity. Her former therapist vouched for her stability. Even her skeptical mother, after a weekend visit with the kids, agreed to speak on her behalf. Still, the odds felt steep. Social workers moved slowly, and the law didn't bend easily for unconventional families. But Emily refused to falter. One night, Alex asked her bluntly, "Why are you doing all this?" Emily stirred the pasta sauce on the stove, then turned to face him. "Because no one ever fought for me when I needed it, and I'll be damned if I let that happen to you." Alex didn't respond right away. But later, after Kaylee had fallen asleep with a book on her chest, he lingered in the doorway. "You should know, if they try to take her again, I'll run, and I'll take her with me." Emily met his gaze. "Then they'll have to go through me first." And for the first time, he smiled. Just barely, just for a second. But it was real. It was a quiet Tuesday evening. Rain tapped gently against the windows, softening the usual buzz of city life. The apartment glowed with the warmth of lamplight, and the smell of garlic bread drifted through the air. Dinner was simple: spaghetti, salad, and Emily's attempt at homemade brownies that came out a little too gooey, just the way Kaylee liked them. They sat at the table together, a scene so ordinary it felt sacred. Kaylee kicked her legs under the chair, humming as she ate. Alex kept his eyes on his plate, but listened to every word, always the sentinel. Emily was refilling glasses when Kaylee suddenly looked up, her face curious and serious in equal measure. "Emily," she said, "if you can't be a mommy, can you still be ours?" The question landed like a soft grenade. Emily froze. The pitcher tilted slightly in her hand, a drop of water spilling onto the table. She set it down slowly. "Kaylee," she began, voice quiet. But the little girl pressed on, her tone matter-of-fact. "You make us pancakes. You fix my hair. You tell Alex it's okay when he messes up his math. That's what mommies do, right?" Emily sat down. "I guess I just thought mommies were supposed to come with, babies and husbands and all the stuff in movies." Alex looked up now, something unreadable in his eyes. "But I don't need you to be a mommy with all that," Kaylee added. "You're already doing the parts that count." Emily blinked, her throat tight. She reached across the table and took Kaylee's hand in one of hers, Alex's in the other. "I don't care what they call it," she said, voice thick with emotion. "I just want to keep showing up, for both of you." Alex nodded, slowly, like someone giving permission not just to her, but to himself. Later that night, as Emily tucked Kaylee into bed, the girl whispered sleepily, "You're our safe place." And Emily, standing there in the doorway with the light from the hall spilling across the floor, realized something profound. She had never needed to become a mother to have a family. She had simply needed to be chosen, and to choose them back. Tieto. Official court date arrived with little fanfare. Emily wore her navy blazer, the one she hadn't touched since job interviews years ago. Alex wore a button-down shirt, his only one, and Kaylee insisted on wearing the purple hoodie, declaring it her lucky outfit. They sat side by side in the waiting room of family court, a small island of calm surrounded by fluorescent lights and the low murmur of other lives in transition. Emily gripped the folder in her lap. Documents, letters, photos. Everything. She had to prove that love, though unconventional, had made this trio into something real. Inside the courtroom, it was quick. Too quick, almost. The judge glanced through the file, skimmed over the glowing caseworker evaluations, noted the clean home visit reports. Then she looked at Emily, not unkindly, but with the practiced neutrality of someone who's seen every shape of loss and hope walk through her doors. "You're aware that full guardianship is permanent?" the judge asked. "I am," Emily replied, steady. "And that you are not biologically related to either child?" "No, but I am their home." The judge paused, then glanced at Alex and Kaylee. "Do you both want this?" Alex, for once, didn't hesitate. "Yeah, we're tired of running." Kaylee nodded, her small hand clutching Emily's. The gavel came down with a soft thud. And just like that, with no applause, no confetti, no music, they became a family. That evening, Emily cooked spaghetti again, the same as that night, weeks ago. They ate by candlelight, not for celebration, but because the power had flickered out in a late spring storm. They didn't care. After dinner, Kaylee danced barefoot in the hallway. Alex helped with dishes, shoulder brushing against Emily's in a way that felt more like trust than routine. When bedtime came, Kaylee kissed Emily's cheek and called her Our Emily, a title more sacred than any label printed on paper. Later, as the wind pressed against the windows and thunder rolled in the distance, Emily stood at the doorway to their shared room and watched them sleep. No one would ever call her a mother in the traditional sense. No ultrasound photos, no first kicks, no baby showers. But as she stood there, wrapped in the quiet heartbeat of the home they had built, she understood something with absolute clarity. This wasn't motherhood by permission. It was motherhood by choice. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel broken. She felt full. Thank you for joining this story. If it touched your heart even just a little, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more stories that matter. Where in the world are you watching from? And what moment from this story stayed with you the most? We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. You're part of this journey too.